Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Walden Art. And today I'm at the Anza College doing a presentation about my working comics. So my name is Walden Wong. I'm a comic book artist, and I'm going to be doing a speech about how I work in comics, process of comics, my working comics, and how inking is done. So without further ado, let's get to it.
How did you first get interested in art?
How did I first get interested in art? So, as a little kid, I was always interested in art. My first recollection of being an artist was when I was in kindergarten class. One of my kindergarten teachers said to my parents in a parents-teacher conference, "Hey, you know what? Your son isn't doing that well in school, so maybe he needs to stay behind kindergarten another year." And then I said, okay. No, I didn't say it. My father said, okay. And then the teacher said, well, but he's really good at art. So that's my first recollection of being an artist. Yeah.
What inspired you to work in comics as a career?
So all my life, growing up, I was always an artist. Growing up, my parents would say, you know, you can't make money being an artist unless you die. And then at that time, people can sell your artwork. So I wasn't really going into that direction, going from high school to college. I graduated at San Francisco State University, but I got a degree in business marketing. Business marketing, thinking that I would do package design or design logos. So in my mind, there's something related to art. But then when I graduated, the jobs that were offered in business marketing wasn't paying me as much as what I was making working at a bank funding my school. So when I was going to school, I was working at Wells Fargo Bank. Working at Wells Fargo Bank, the money I made, I paid for tuition. So when I graduated, I found out that the jobs that were hiring for business marketing was paying less than what I was working at the bank. So I decided I'm not going to go towards that direction. And then I decided, you know, I'm going to try to get work as a comic book artist, because I was always reading comic books when I was a kid. Since I can remember. So when I found out that you can work in comics, I decided, no, I'm going to give myself a year to see if I can get work in the comics industry. So I will prepare samples, samples, kind of like something like this. I'll have a folder with my work, and I'll bring something like this to conventions. So when I bring this to a convention, I'll wait in line for editors and publishers to look at the work, and then if they see potential, they'll ask me for a business card or a sample packet, and then that's how I started getting work. So I gave myself a year. Within that year, I got work doing stuff for Marvel and DC. My first work at Marvel was X-Force. I don't know if you guys heard of X-Force. X-Force appeared in the recent movie at Deadpool. And then my first work at DC Comics was JLA. JLA is Justice League of America, and that is a team book that consists of Batman, Superman, Aquaman, Flash. So it's all the main character, all the iconic characters from DC Comics.
Was inking something you always wanted to do, and how would you explain maybe the differences between inking and other disciplines?
Okay, so was inking something that I wanted to do? So when I approached being a comic book artist in the field, I wanted to be a penciler. But I met another artist in San Francisco who worked at a comic book shop. His name was Arthur Adams. Arthur Adams, he's been drawing for a very long time. And I talked to him, and said, getting this penciling work is kind of hard. What do I need to do? And then he said, why don't you try inking? Oh, what's inking? I don't know what inking is. Inking is when you have the pencils and you're going over, you're embellishing, you're adding details, you're fixing mistakes. So I said, how do I approach doing that? So he gave me photocopies of this work, and I would use vellum. I don't know if you guys know what vellum is. Vellum is like a tracing paper. Tracing paper where I would put that on top, and I would ink directly on top of that. And then after that, that's how I developed my samples. So when I first started getting work as an inker, it started snowballing. So the more I did inking, the more work I got. And it's an enjoyable process. I didn't want to be an inker, but I just happened to be an inker. And I get to work with all these other pencilers like all over the world. So it's very satisfying. I've worked with artists that I've admired when I was a kid. And then now, fast forward maybe 10 years later, 20-something years later, I'm working with them. So that's a nice, it's nice. And then when I'm done with the work, I get to keep the artwork that they drew.
As a kid, is there anything particular you liked to draw, or anything that inspired you?
As a kid, I remember drawing this little ninja guy. It was just like, all kids like ninjas, right? And then I would just draw a little ninja, kind of like Snake Eyes. You guys know who Snake Eyes is from G.I. Joe? Yeah, so I would draw that character over and over again. And it's Spider-Man, because that was my first exposure of a superhero. A long time ago, they used to have a program, educational program called the Electric Company. And in Electric Company, you see a Spider-Man, walking around. So that's my first exposure of Spider-Man. So I drew Spider-Man and then my little ninja guy.
Do you have any tips for aspiring artists to improve their artwork and maybe get into the industry?
Okay, do I have any tips for aspiring artists to get into the industry? Yes, that's to practice every day. The more you practice, the better you get. And I can't stress this enough. It's not even just for comics. Any field you want to get into, the more you practice, the better you get. I draw almost every day, when I'm not doing it for work, I'm doing it on my own. When I'm not doing it on my own, I'm doing it for, like, in teaching class. I'll be teaching art classes at my studio. I'll be teaching at the Academy of Art University. I'll be teaching at the Senior Center. So it's always constantly doing art. And you know how people will say, if you do a lot, it becomes an art form? So you can be a bank teller. You do it so frequently, it's that you get that muscle memory that becomes an art form. So just like anything, the more you practice, the better you get. And then also learn. When I was younger, there wasn't YouTube or internet or anything like that. So I had to learn from going to comic book conventions and talking to artists and then asking them, oh, what am I doing differently? How do I improve? So that's how I learned. So it was a long process. You guys who are in school helps speeds it up. When you're learning from an instructor, it just helps speeds up that process. I was a self-taught artist. So that took a little bit longer for me to start and to get work.
Do you find like the online platforms like ArtStation or DeviantArt a good way to get your artwork out there? To get your artwork,
yeah. So I have DeviantArt. On top of DeviantArt, I also have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all that. So that's like, if you're an artist, okay, there's 3 things you have to know to be a very successful artist, okay? Any of you guys know what it is? Okay, one is you have to be very good at what you do, okay? The second thing is you have to be very fast at what you do. And the third thing, which relates to social media, is you have to get along with people. You have to market yourself. If you're a really good artist and you can't market yourself, no one's gonna know that you're an artist. You can get by with 2 of the 3 things, but with 3 of them, you can do really well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you describe the typical production process for a comic?
Okay, yeah, so I can do the whole production. Yeah, I have it all laid out. So with comics, there's monthly comics starts with an editor. So an editor would contact a writer and they'll have a script. A script something like this. So this is 1 page for a book called Anakin Skywalker. You guys know Anakin Skywalker? That's like Darth Vader, records Darth Vader. So the writer will write the story and then send it to the editor. Editor will look over the story and see if it's okay. So the script will say, this is what's on the panel, this is what's happening. So after that, the penciler would then do thumbnails, like layouts. So like this is on 1 piece of paper, he'll do like quick, scratchy thumbnails like that. And the editors will look at it and then see, okay, we need to change a little bit of this. So next panel. So here, this one's kind of small. So this one is this panel where that Anakin is sitting there, and like that. And then the editor would say, oh, we need to move some of the characters around because it's not going to fit some of the word balloons. So the pencil would change it and adjust it. So this is the layout before anything's drawn. So it's like this as a thumbnail. This is like a process that probably takes like maybe 10 minutes to draw. And after that, editor will say, okay, this is good to go. So the pencil will start drawing it. So he draws it and it looks like this. This is an 11 by 17 page. 11 by 17 is this size. Okay, this is the size we draw in. So comic books are smaller. Comic books are small in this size. We draw larger just so we can put more details onto the artwork. And then when we're done, we shrink the artwork 67%. So here's where I come in. After everything's drawn, the pencil could either send me the original artwork for me to ink over, or they could send me the file. So when he sends me the file, the reason we work with files, this is called blue line. Any of you guys know what blue lines are? Okay, blue lines is when we take a pencil file and we use Photoshop and convert it to a light blue image. The reason we convert it to a light blue image, so when we ink on top of it and scan it, everything that's scanned, we don't see the light blue on top. So in this case, here's a light blue. So I'll convert it and it looks exactly like this. So when I print it out on my printer, I'll use a brush, quill, different tools that I'll use, and I'll ink it. When I'm done inking, it looks like the next image, like that. So from the start, I'll add details like little spots here, render on the floor, make sure everything's drawn correctly. So sometimes, for example, sometimes you'll get an artist that will draw the logo wrong. Or in this case, not on this page, but when I was working on Anakin Skywalker, the pencil was drawing the lightsaber wrong. And we were working with Lucasfilm, ILM, and then they would look at the artwork and say, oh, the button on this lightsaber is drawn incorrectly, can you fix it? And because the work we do is a time-sensitive process, the editor will ask me to redraw some of the images. So after I'm done with the inking, it goes to a colorist. The colorist would then color up the page like that. So that's the next step. Okay, once it's colored, it goes back to the editor again, and then the editor will say, oh, we need to change some of the colors or whatnot. And then after that's approved, it goes to a letterer. A letterer is the person who would just add text. So from the script, they would take the text here, and they would just copy it and then draw the word balloons or the captions and add that on top. And then that's how one page is made. One page usually typically takes a day. So a day for a pencil to draw, a day for a inker, and then a day for colorist, and then so forth. Now, we have different teams working on it just so we can have the process done quicker. If one artist were to do this whole issue, it would take them probably 6 months to finish the work. But if we have an assembly line where the penciler is working on issue, say the colorist is color issue 1, the inker can be inking issue 2, the writer can be working on issue 3, and then the writer can, colorist working on issue 1, inker working on issue 2, 3 and 4, and so forth. So that way, it's just a constant flow of work. So this book, for Anakin Skywalker, so this is the cover of the book. So that's how this cover is. So comic books, they're like a small pamphlet size. They're like connected with a stapler. Publishers will collect 4 to 6 issues and compile it together, and that's when you get a graphic novel. So this book later on became a graphic novel, and this is the graphic novel. This is in stores now. So graphic novel is a much thicker book, like this. They'll just take out all the ads. A regular size comic book is 32 pages or so, but not including ads, it's actually only 20 pages of artwork. So that's how a comic book is made. Is that good?
Yeah, good, very thorough answer. How did you find time, like in college? I noticed you studied business marketing.
Yeah.
How do you find the time to balance practicing your artwork and dealing with schoolwork?
Okay, so in college, I didn't really practice this form of art. I would just draw, and I would get in trouble a lot. I would get in a lot of trouble drawing. In college, I remember sitting in a classroom like this with such a big classroom. I was like sit back there, and the teacher's giving a lecture. And I remember this very clearly. It was an economics class. I would draw stuff and give it to my classmates, and then the teacher said, "Stop drawing." Okay, he sees me from all the way back there. And I'm like, okay, stop drawing. And then I just couldn't contain myself, and I drew again. I drew and I gave it to another class. So all of a sudden, I looked up. I see a chalkboard eraser flying from the room here all the way across me, almost like a scene of Matrix. You know, that little moment was very. So I see it, and then the dust trail. So I got in trouble a lot. Also, when I was working at the bank, I would draw coworkers, like caricatures of coworkers, and I would stick it on their window and then put it on his desk. And then my bosses and coworkers, they would get so upset. They would rip it up. That's not me. And I go, it is you. I just accentuate like the right, your nose is bigger or yeah. So I got in trouble a lot during with drawing, but I've always been drawing. Like when I was studying in school, I would be drawing on the margins. Now, as I graduated San Francisco State, that's when I decided to really get into working in comic books. So that's when I started doing samples. So I was doing the full-time job full-time, and then going home and doing samples maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. So like I mentioned earlier, a page usually takes a day to draw. It took me 1 month to do one page because I want every line to be perfect. That way I'm not wasting time. I was really driven to get the work. So that's how I was able to do samples while I was working. But during college, I know like for you guys, you're in school now and you want to do work, and it's possible. If you have that drive, just try to get samples ready if you're an artist, and then do your work. I have some artists that I teach at the academy where I said, they're good, this is what you need to do. And then before they even graduate, they started doing comic book work.
Does anyone in your family like to draw?
No one in my family likes to draw. Every so often, I would teach the 2 daughters how to draw. But usually when there's like homework drawing stuff, they would say, Daddy, can you help me draw this? Sure. And I would just draw it. And then they would say, can you not draw so detailed? It doesn't have to be that good. Teacher's not going to believe that I drew it. Like that. So I like drawing. I'll teach them how to draw. But they do, their interest is elsewhere. Yeah, I figured that if I'm the artist, I can do all the art. And then every so often when I teach classes at my studio is at my home. I have my regular drawing studio, and then right next I have a big, huge classroom, about half the size of this room. So I teach there. And then I'll have my daughters come in and join the class.
Any favorite comic book characters?
My favorite comic book characters, my all-time favorite comic book character is Deadpool. It was Spider-Man and then Deadpool. I started working with Marvel, and I had like a maybe 4-year run working on Deadpool, and later on, more recently, another 3-year run on Deadpool. So I've been working on Deadpool for a very long time before the movie came out. Not a lot of people know this, but when I was working on Deadpool, me and the penciler that we were working together, we would talk about Deadpool, and we would draw his costume differently, and no one even knew the difference. Because Deadpool's a red and black color costume, we would draw the stripes a little bit differently, like the designs a little bit different. None of the readers even knew. But right now, I can draw Deadpool like any design, and it will still look like Deadpool. As long as you get that Spider-Man head and the eyes, and then without the webbing, that's Deadpool. And then the design, just do whatever, and it looks like Deadpool.
Going back to the inking, is there any like particular kind of ink that you use?
Yeah, I use a lot of different kinds of ink. I use, you guys heard of India ink? You guys know what India ink is? India ink is an archival ink. Speedball is a company that makes India ink. Higgins is another company. If you buy those microns or Sharpie and you draw on top of this, I learned this the hard way. When I was in high school, I would take, okay, so let's rewind a little bit. The only art class I've ever taken was 1 high school drawing class and 2 high school painting class. I learned the hard way that my teacher used to ask me to use India ink for my work, but I didn't want to use a tool, so I kind of cheated a little bit. I use a Sharpie to fill everything in, or I'll buy a micron and I'll draw in all the line work. 10 years later, that artwork is still hanging in my parents' house. It's starting to fade. It's turning a light brown to a point where you can't see the artwork anymore. So now I use archival inks, which means that your paper can turn yellow, but the ink will still stay solid black. So that's the type of ink that you should be using, like archival inks. I even do commission work these days for other artists who's done work. Okay, so like these comic book art, when we're done doing the work, we get to keep the original art, and then we can sell it to collectors or people who wants to collect artwork. Some of the art from years past, artists will use Sharpies or Microns, and then now it's starting to fade. I have people contacting me and ask me to retouch some of the artwork with Archival Inks. So any ink is always the best ink. Any ink is the same ink that people use to tattoo the arms, so that's the type of ink. Okay?
And for the India ink, you have to use dip pens, right?
Yes, we use what's called a quill nib. You guys know what a quill nib is? Okay, for those of you who don't know what quill nib is, you know what they signed the Declaration of Independence with? It's like a feather, with a like that's cut in an angle. Basically, it's that feather cut in an angle, and then in the middle they cut a slit in it. But it's made of metal. That quill nib is when you're inking, when you apply pressure on it, that line, when you apply pressure, that line opens up. So when it opens up, it makes the lines thicker. So I'll use a quill nib, and then I'll use a brush, and then I'll use tech pins, I'll use microns. Now microns, I don't use microns directly from the package. But usually I'll get the microns, and then I would just let my kids draw whatever. And when it's out of ink, I'll refill the ink with my own. I'll refill the microns with my own ink. There's a way that you can do that. Companies don't want you to refill your own ink, but I've figured out. I mean, if you guys want to know, you can look at my YouTube channel. I have an instructional video on how to refill the ink. So what I do is I'll get a knife and I'll pull out the nib tip, and then I'll drop a few drops of archival inks. Those ink is always better than the ink that's in the microns. Yeah, well, I've been in this business for 23 years. Like, I've learned a lot of tricks to get around doing things. Like, after a while, you just know what tools work best for you. Yeah, it's not like you can get a brush and get a quill and like do whatever. There's a specific reason for what type of ink. For example, if I use a quill, I will use a Higgins Black Magic ink. If I'm using a brush, I will use a Speedball ink. So there's different inks that I like to use for different tools.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun experimenting with pens and markers and refilling it.
Oh yeah, refilling it. There's one thing I recommend not doing. If you have like a bottle of this ink and a bottle of another ink, don't pour it together. Never pour together. I had a 16-ounce bottle of Higgins, 16-ounce bottle of Sumi, or another ink. I said, oh, I'm just gonna pour it together so I can, throw away the bottle. After I poured it together, 2 weeks later, that whole bottle of ink coagulated. So try not to mix your ink, especially if you have that much. Just keep it in separate bottles, because the formula in each ink, if it's like the chemical reaction or something, it just coagulates. So never mix your inks. Yeah, you every so often you hear artists say, oh, I like doing this and doing that and mixing it, but that's because they're using it quickly. But if you're having something and you're setting it there for like weeks, you don't want to do that. At home I have bottles of ink that's coagulating. I just don't use it. It's like paperweight.
Do you ever work digitally?
I have. So I've done most of my digital work is post-production, and then sometimes like earlier I was saying that editor or ILM, Lucas, they would ask us to change the lightsaber. So I would go on the computer, use Photoshop, and just redraw the lightsaber, or little things, but not really like the larger things. Okay, so I have done digital work. So those of you who are doing digital work, the best tool to use is the iPad Pro with Procreate, the program, with a pencil. That's what I use.
Do you ever meet up with other artists, maybe like, do you know Jim Lee?
I met Jim Lee.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim Lee looked over my work. I met a lot of artists, and the comic book industry is a really small industry. Working in the field for so long, you get to meet everyone, or you get to know them. So I met a lot of different comic book artists when I go to conventions, and that's the only time we see each other. We'll talk on the phone or we'll email each other, but majority of the time is I'll fly to a convention here, and then they're also going to the same convention, and that's when I meet up with them. And that's like another nice thing about working in the comic book industry. You know of each other's work, and then when you go to a convention, you see each other for the first time, people say, oh, you're Jim Lee, oh, you're Walden Wong. And then you feel like you know each other for a long time based on your work.
All right.
Thank you both. We're going to take a quick little break if people need to leave, and Walden's going to set up to show us some of his work.
Okay. Okay, so I've been working in comics for 23 years. The reason I remember I started in 1996 is because I still have a photocopy of my first paycheck on my drawing table. That paycheck was for drawing 22 pages, and I got paid $120 for 22 pages. It was very, very low. I think if you do math, it's roughly like $8 a page. But at the time, I didn't really mind how much I was getting. I just wanted my work to be published. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about inking. So this is Barbara Gordon from Batman. Can you see the difference? I mean, it's the same image drawn by the same penciler. I took that same image, I created a blue line, and I made 6 different images. But each of these are inked differently. Okay, you guys see the difference? Yeah. And for example, some of the turkey over here is rendered differently. Also the outline, for example, this one, here's a really thick, bold, dead outline. Whereas a line like this, here's a thinner line. And each of these are inked differently. This was inked with a brush, and this was inked with a quill. This one was also a quill. This was inked with a micron. So you can see how using different tools can create a different look. Or do you guys see looking at the same image, looking the same? Okay. So the next image is the Beast from the X-Men. Each of these are inked differently. One with the brush, one with the quill, another with the micron, and also different techniques of inking. For example, right here, I would ink this with a blunt line. Up here, I would taper the lines. Tapering lines is where I have a little triangle. So with the trained eye, I mean, if you work in comics, you can see difference in line weights. Okay. Now, yes?
Did you see you use a little triangle?
Yeah, so a taper line. A taper line is like this line right here. So instead of having like a black solid area and you're doing like a hatch line, you're gonna have like a gray area, and all of a sudden it abruptly becomes black. So when I do that triangle, the taper triangle, like very skinny triangles, it creates a smoother black to gray to a white gradation. So those are called taper lines. With inking, there's a lot of different inking techniques. So once you know it, you can apply those. Just like hatching, there's cross hatching, and taper lines and stippling, a lot of different inking techniques.
Sorry to interrupt you, but so like the shadow above his, what would be his left eye?
Yes. Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here, this is where I'm just hatching the line. This is where I'm tapering the line. You can see that it's smoother here compared to here. You see that outline over here? So it's done differently. This is with microns, where I would double up the lines. Okay. Different techniques to inking. Okay. Now, Karen, who told me about this, she invited me to come here, and then she asked. She was texting me and she goes, "Walden, have you worked on this all Asian comic book?" She texted me a picture and I go, "Oh yeah." So that's this next image. This penciler drew this. It's called War of the Realms, Agents of Atlantis or something. This is in stores now. So this penciler, he would draw this first, and he would draw this in one layer. And then he would add characters on the next layer. Characters around here. This is supposed to be an all Asian comic book for Marvel. And then he would add the hand, like right in front. Next image, like that. So he would draw this and scan it and then place it all together. With after the editor's approval, he would send that to me, and then I would get it and I would ink it up. So after I ink it up, it looks like this. So it's much cleaner. So everything is on one page. So after I ink it up, it would be sent to the colorist and the letterer who would put all the details on front for the cover. So the cover is like this. So this is the final cover for War of Realms, New Agents of Atlas #2. Okay, and those of you who are, okay, here's a nice surprise for you guys. Those of you who are gonna buy comic books today, I have a book that's released in stores today. So if you go to a store, look up the next one. This is out in stores today. Yeah, so this is the Incredible Hulk Last Call. It's the 20th anniversary reunion of the writer and artist, and they had me help out, work on like maybe 1/3 of the issue. So I'll show you guys some of the artwork, which none of you guys have ever seen. Okay, next one. So here's the Hulk. Okay, let's go to the next one. And then here's Bruce Banner getting radioactive. And then next one, here's more of the details. So a lot of details. So some of these rendering, we would just do hatch lines over there. or we would do line weights. Another thing is line weights. Line weight is when we use a quill, have lines thin and thick. That's what we're doing over here. And then here's also the Hulk. So if you're gonna go to a comic book store, it's released today. Today's the first day of release. Okay, and then that's. I'm pretty excited that today was the day. Yeah, New Comic Wednesday. Okay. So, any questions about my work in the comic book field? Or yes?
This is kind of a collaboration question.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit what it's like about when you start to work with a person that you've never met before, you've never seen before, and again, like I said, it's 2019, you're probably not even calling the person, you're
Yes.
emailing the person?
Yes. So these days, unlike, we can do the slideshow. Yeah, so these days, unlike before, where I would call the person or like talk to them, like the phone bill would be like very expensive. These days, we don't even talk to people on the phone anymore. The editors I work with, I don't even know how they sound like. I would just get an email from the editor. They'll ask me, "Oh, Walden, do you have time to work on this project? Are you interested in working on this project?" And then I'll say yes. And then I'll be working with a penciler or a writer or a letterer, with a lot of different people. And then we would just email each other and introduce ourselves. And then even though we don't know each other, we kind of know what each other does in the field. And then we just start getting along. And then a lot of times when I'm working with a pencil who I've never worked with, I would study the work. I would study the work just to see how they like the work. And then I would ask them, "Oh, how would you like me to approach inking your artwork?" After I find out what they like, I would go that direction. I would finish one page, I would send it to the penciler. Penciler will look at it, "Oh, I want things to be done differently." So I would adjust that way. So none of this is by phone. Most of it is by email these days. Email or text messenger, which we can talk to each other back and forth immediately. Does that answer your question?
A little. So just one follow-up is,
Okay.
are you sending them like just a giant resolution?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so when I work with the publishers, we scan it at 600 DPI, we reduce it to 400 DPI and 67%. That's the image that we send to the publishers. Okay, now we will send a JPEG for the viewing, we reduce that to 120 DPI. So the images that I'm sending, they're smaller, which is like an easier way to send it out. If you're sending a large format, it's just gonna take forever to get it out there.
But between the penciler and you,
Yeah, between the pencil, we'll reduce it to 120. If that's the same image I would send to the penciler to the editor. But when I'm sending the image to a colorist, I leave it at 400 DPI because we need that large size to reduce for the colors.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Any other questions about comics? Yes?
You spoke a little bit about how much you got paid in the very beginning, but for like people who are getting into it now, what would you recommend they do for determining pricing themselves for their work?
Okay, so when I got into the industry, I didn't really care how much I paid. Even some of my earlier works, I was doing it for free. But as you get older, you kind of value your time over how much the work. So for a pencil, I can give you a range. Penciling, you can get paid $150 to $250 a page, depending on the publisher. Now that's just penciling. Inking, you can get like $100 to $175 a page, but that's for the larger publishers. And then also, the more pages you can put out, the more pages that you can draw, the more you get paid. Now, being an artist, there's no such thing as a vacation, no such thing as holidays, weekends. When you're not working, you're not getting paid for the work. So if you're comic books, you have to be very disciplined to do the work. If you're hanging out with friends or playing video games, you're not going to get work done. And then if you're not going to get the work done, the publishers will always be able to hire another artist to do the work. Because for every one comic book that you're working on, there's 20 or 30 other artists that wants to do the same work. Like there's not a lot of, like there's only like maybe a couple of Spider-Man books. Like there's maybe 50 different artists that wants to work on the same book. So you have to be very disciplined in order to maintain that work.
Does it matter where you live?
It doesn't matter where you live. So I've never stepped foot in Marvel Comics or DC Comics. Marvel is located in New York. DC is located in Burbank, and I've never worked there. The publishers will hire artists all over the world, overseas. And I will work with other artists in different countries and different cities. Now, earlier you mentioned, does that answer the question? Yeah, earlier you mentioned how much artists get paid. So there's that page rate. After you're done with the page, the artwork here, like this, we get to keep the artwork. The publisher doesn't own the artwork. We own the artwork. They only own the images. So we take this artwork, we bring it to a convention, and we can sell that for additional funds. So we're doubling our income. And depending on what page it is, you can sell some for a good amount. Like the lowest I would sell something is maybe $100, and the most I ever sold something was $2,000 for one page. So remember that Atlas comic? Here's the original art. Yeah, here's the original art for it. And also, when you work in comics, there's royalties. So depending on how many books the publisher prints, you get like a certain percentage of it. For example, me as an inker, I get like 0.02%. But that amounts to a lot because the book gets printed so many times. And also, it'll get reprinted and also translated to different languages. Superman Red Sun, which is this book. This is a book I did 20 years ago. I'm still getting royalties from this. So every quarter, I would get a good chunk of money from this book. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay.
If you combine two disciplines, do you add those prices together, like that you would kind of given a range of? So say you pencil and ink, or is that?
Yeah. So
or
if
do
you pencil and ink, you kind of think about this is how much it is for penciling. This is how much for inking. But if you're doing that yourself, you kind of have to lower it because usually when you're penciling for yourself, you're not drawing everything in detail. You're kind of like when I draw for myself and I'm inking myself, I would just do a ghost figure and then just ink on top of it. So it's a little bit less than what you would get paid separately. Even the publishers, if they're hiring you for inking, you get paid this amount. You get hired for pencil, you get paid this amount. But if you're doing both, it's not this plus this. It's a little bit of the two, a little bit less. And there you have it. That's my presentation at the Anza College about my working comic books. Any questions, comment down below. Please share, subscribe, hit like, and check out my Patreon page. I'll add links below. On my Patreon page, I also talk about projects that I'm working on and also videos that I post up. So check that out. And also check out my website, waldenwongart.com. So until next time, be good and keep practicing your work in art. Take care. How did you guys enjoy the presentation?
Excellent.
Good?
Super.
So I'm gonna have this up on YouTube. So thank you all for coming. And then some of you are gonna stay behind for the second presentation.
As a freelancer, what do you do for health insurance?
Oh, we have to buy ourselves. It's very expensive compared to working with like a company. You just buy it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's expensive.
So my secondary question was like, I have RSI, and I feel like I can't even sit in my computer for more than, and I do.
Oh, it's fine.
Have to rest
I
your
was just
hand.
looking over your
Yeah,
shoulder.
every so often I'll walk away. I'll do rest my hand. Yeah.
Oh, no,
But
don't worry
back
about
to the insurance thing. It's 100% write-offable, so that's still okay. So even though I pay a lot, like I write it off.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. Justice League.
So you actually have these sheets that you have to do the inking on?
Yeah, that's the actual art. That's the work. So
So
marble.
you're referencing the digital image that you got sent from the
Yes.
person who's sketching
Yeah,
it,
so
and
marble-
you're just redrawing it.
Yes. So
Okay.
I'll get the image. I'll print it out in the light blue, and I'll ink on top of it.
Oh, so you're printing it directly onto this,
Yeah.
and that way when you scan it, it doesn't show.
Yes. So
Oh,
all
okay, I got
like
it.
these blue stuff, it doesn't show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Marvel was sending me the boards. I just put the boards to my printer and I'll print it that way. Yeah, just a
Now
little
that you
bit
say
of
that. Okay.
blue.
I just have a question.
Yes.
So I noticed in your slideshow, it seems like the colorist is interpreting your inking.
Yes.
So how does that work?
So the editors have a color guide for the colors.
characters?
Yeah, or
Okay.
they'll reference the colors.
Uh-huh.
Usually the backgrounds and spaceships or whatever,
Yeah.
they're on their own. And then if it doesn't match up, then they'll have to redo it. Yeah, but the characters are usually like that established color.
So it's a bit like cell animation where they had,
Cell animation,
where
almost
they
like
had
so.
like, they have the color swatches, right? Like,
Yeah.
and- yeah, cell shading.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then they also need to think about light sources. That's how it works.
So are they doing it by hand or are they
No,
doing
it's
it
with
digitally?
Photoshop.
Photoshop,
Photoshop
okay.
digitally.
And so that's how they're kind of blending, because they're not using your inking all the time,
Yeah.
right? If they're doing like a
Sometimes,
glow or something like that.
Yeah, so sometimes the colors they'll take over the inking, which doesn't really look that good.
Yeah.
But if they'll color, they'll put the line work back on top.
So it's like an underlay or an overlay
Yes.
depending on what you're doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
overlayer with inks is always better.
Okay.
Yeah, because without it, it looks like a painting. It's kind of
Yeah, yeah, that was wondering about the covers, because the covers, I think, like,
Yeah,
retain the
that,
least
that
amount
cover
of
that we
inking.
saw earlier.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, all the inks were gone.
Yeah.
Like, why hire a inker at all? But the publishers, they need the inks to have it ready for the color.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like each person is interpreting what the previous person did and
Yes,
doing corrections?
exactly.
Okay.
Like I'm interpreting what the pencil is doing, colors is interpreting what we're
Yeah,
doing,
yeah.
and then so on.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had a question too, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like you say, you do it all digital, and you scan the ink.
Yes.
Does it look perfect black like that when you scan it, or
Yeah.
does?
When I scan in color, sometimes there's a little bit of gray.
Yeah.
So I'll use Photoshop and I'll adjust the contrast a little bit. And so that's the post-production where I'll go scan it and then I'll kind of darken up some areas or I'll kind of lighten up some areas. Yeah. So there is some work on the computer as well.
Okay. And also, how do you keep it like? Is there a technique to keep it like perfectly clean white, or is that just a practice?
On after scan or on the
Like
artwork?
on the scan too. But
Yeah.
like on.
Well,
the
if you're
paper
drawing,
first.
if you're inking on pencil, there's no way of getting that smudgy pencil. It's gonna smudge. But when I print on blue line, my hand stays clean. That pencil doesn't move around.
Okay, so like if you use the blue, it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't smudge.
smear while
Yeah,
you're inking.
if you're drawing with a blue pencil, it will smear. But because I'm printing out the light blue, it's like printing out like something like a diddle or printing out a letter or something. It doesn't smear.
Also, it's because you print it. That's
Yeah, because I print it.
You
Yeah.
don't get the waxy.
Yeah, I don't get the wax. It's very. I like working on blue line because it's very clean. Back then when I was inking over original pencils, when I'm done, a lot of great pencils.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very nice.
Glitter star on your.
Well, I think it's on the top side.
No, I know.
Do you also do the borders?
Yes.
Is that
So I'll use a ruler and I'll draw the line. I can also do that on the computer. I'll convert it in blue line first, and then I'll draw the black line, and then I'm putting a black line, black and blue.
okay? Like, do you use a special marker for the border?
I do use a repeatograph techno kit. And I use like a size.